Hello there, this is David with Stupid Things People Do and what we can learn from them. Today I'm going to keep ranting and raving about bullying. And if that makes it sound like I have a chip on my shoulder, well... Joking aside, lots of Americans have been victims of bullying at some point in their life. And yes, that does include yours truly. And one of the problems with bullies is that there's not a lot victims can do except rely on the people in power to respond. Or rather, there's not a lot they can do that won't result in an escalating conflict. This means that leadership, whether it's the high school principal or the HR president, have a responsibility to address the issue. And if they fail to address the issue, that's going to possibly create a horrifically toxic school or work environment, escalating conflict, and or some form of legal action. Often you're going to score all four and get a version of courtroom bingo that nobody wants to win. So, like many stories about workplace melodrama, ours begins with a salesperson. We'll call him Steve. And Steve very wisely chose not to pursue workplace relationships and was very careful to date outside of the office. The problem is workplace relationships chose to pursue him when his ex, we'll call her Tiffany, became Steve's direct manager. So that's awkward, and it didn't get less awkward when, in 2010, Tiffany hired her BFF, who we'll call Jiffany, to work for the company. And Jiffany brought on her own flavor of office melodrama by alleging that in 2009, Steve sexually harassed her. So at this point, we could best describe the situation as getting double retconned into trouble. By the way, I have no idea whether Steve actually sexually harassed Jiffany in 2009. But the trick is, in 2009, Jiffany wasn't an employee. And spoiler warning, eventually Jiffany did get leadership to investigate that claim, and leadership found it to be baseless and unsupported. But the thing is, it doesn't matter if your accusation is baseless or unsupported, or even requires time travel. When leadership is your BFF, who you're telling secrets to at a sleepover, I'm not joking, those two literally did that. And when the subject of said secrets is said leader's ex, well, at that point, the investigative process doesn't matter so much as vengeful conspiracy. Specifically, in response to Jiffany's accusations, Tiffany, the manager, began an escalating program of retaliation that included, but was not limited to, cutting Steve's expense budget, prohibiting him from attending meetings, talking to his customers behind his back, sabotaging requests for promotions, hiding communications from customers, reassigning leads, and general mayhem. It's worth noting that the worst of this behavior didn't happen until after Steve complained to HR. Prior to that complaint, the Jiffany-Tiffany revenge campaign had just included criticisms and treating Steve differently from other employees. Once Steve complained about the mean girl's doom spiral, leadership demoted him, and they promoted Tiffany. Mind you, they did this after learning, 1, Tiffany, that's Steve's boss, lied about her past relationships with him. 2, that Jiffany, that's Steve's accuser, that her complaints happened before she was an employee, and that 3, Jiffany's allegations could not be corroborated regardless of when they took place. Also, while HR's investigation simply failed to corroborate Jiffany's allegations, through legal discovery, Steve's lawyers learned that the entirety of the charges against him were the result of a conspiracy between Tiffany and Jiffany. So that's defamation, at least according to a Texas judge who awarded Steve $2 million in damages. So how does this tie into bullying? Well, bullying can generally be understood as repeated, targeted, harmful acts. The details vary by jurisdiction, but what can best be described as slander and conspiracy to commit slander definitely falls under the banner of bullying, which means that leadership is responsible to protect their employees from that exact thing. When Steve went to HR with his concerns about workplace harassment and discrimination, rather than protecting him, HR sided with his bullies and their retaliatory gossamer-thin allegations. For those of us who have been victims of bullying, this story seems pretty familiar. Sure, the example is a bit extreme, but the general idea of, I go to the person with power, tell them about the bullying, but the bully lies, and then I'm the one who gets in trouble, that is something everyone is familiar with from grade school on upward. In grade school, it causes deep emotional harm, but in the professional workplace, it can really ruin lives. That's why there's laws mandating that companies must protect their employees. So what should administrators do? Well, rather than giving you lists, I know the media loves lists, but I don't. We can divide the administrative response into 3 broad categories: visibility and reporting, investigation and follow-up, and prevention and cultivation. Let's begin with visibility and reporting. You can't prevent bullying that you don't know about. That's the visibility component. And you can't have visibility unless employees are willing to be your eyes and ears. That's the reporting component. But they can't be your eyes and ears if they don't know how. And that's where these two things come together to make a whole. You want people to report early, and you want them to report often. which means you not only need to encourage that, you need to establish very clear, navigable policies and procedures for how to report. Also, you need to be sure to document the report. That way, when the Tiffany's and Jiffany's of the world decide to take a Real Housewives of LA approach to conflict management, you'll have some context. Next is investigation and follow-up, and this connects to visibility and reporting. See, if the employees are going to go out on a limb and report, that has a risk to them. Retaliation is illegal, but it's also scary. In fact, the same reasons it's scary, how damaging it is to the person retaliated against, that's also the reason why it's illegal. When employees report, their allegations aren't investigated, that's a betrayal of trust. And when employees stop trusting, they'll also stop reporting workplace abuse. The problem is that workplace abuse remains illegal even if the company is blind to it. And that's the investigation component. You need to actually investigate allegations, and you can't be sneaky about it. Throughout that investigation, the alleged victim will need support, and they'll need to see appropriate actions are being taken, such as remedial training and review. Taken together, investigation and follow-up could just as easily be rephrased as being someone your employees can trust. Speaking of trust, that brings us to the final pillar. Prevention and cultivation. Just like you can do more to be healthy than just taking cold medicine, you can do more to build trust than just responding to allegations. Whether it's cultivating an environment of mutual respect and open communication with team-building activities and feedback mechanisms, or preventing bullying to begin with training and education programs, you can think of all of these as just vitamins and good diet for the workplace. They won't absolutely prevent you from ever getting sick, but boy, oh boy, do they help. David here from the future. Apparently I'm a character now. You'd think we'd have the budget to, I don't know, have an agent of the official redaction guys to issue corrections, but we don't. It's just me. This time without the beard. Anyway, this isn't a correction so much as it is a clarification. Following the last episode where we explained how hostile work environments, constructive discharge theory, and retaliation can all create a weird spiderweb of potential liability, the idiot in the past thought it was a good idea to give you an example of where bullying did create retaliation. But that's because this was a personal injury claim. Bullying, while always awful, isn't necessarily illegal unless it relates to a protected characteristic or unless it caused a tort. That said, in many jurisdictions, bullying is always illegal regardless of the torts and characteristics, but this is going to vary. That said, the idea that a bully would magically fail to make fun of age, race, gender, religion, or disability status, that's like, are they even doing their job? Anyway, regardless of whether it's technically illegal, bullying should always be grounds for discipline. Not only because in the best case scenario, it's Schrodinger's legal, meaning you could very suddenly find it's not legal, like Jiffany and Tiffany found out, but also because permitting bullying is inherently destructive, not just to victims, but also to organizations. Thanks for listening. This has been a stupid series on bullying, and hopefully next time you get to talk to the other guy, and not me.